You know that feeling, right? Where you're just completely exhausted at the end of the day, but you look back and you don't feel like you actually got anything important done. It's like you're pedaling a bike as hard as you can, but you're just not going anywhere. Well, today, we're going to dig into the hidden law that explains exactly why that happens. I want you to think back, maybe to your school days. You had a whole Saturday to write, say, a 5-page paper. And you woke up, you had breakfast, you cleaned your room, you watched some TV, and suddenly it's 9 p.m. That panic monster kicks in, you finally sit down to work, and somehow you actually finish it by midnight. How on earth is that possible? Well, the answer is right here in this one simple but incredibly powerful observation. This is the big idea we're unpacking today, and it's so consistently true that it actually got its own law. It's called Parkinson's Law. It was first written down in a kind of satirical essay way back in 1955. And no, this isn't some law of physics, it's a law of human nature. The idea is really simple. The amount of work it takes to do something isn't a fixed thing. Nope. It inflates or it shrinks, kind of like a gas filling up whatever container it's in, to fit the time you've given it. Okay, so let's see how this actually plays out in real life, in our jobs, where this law is secretly pulling the strings on our schedules and, maybe more importantly, on our stress levels. So, picture this. Your boss gives you a whole week to write a report. Almost immediately, that task starts to feel huge, like this monumental effort. You'll find extra data you have to analyze, you'll spend hours tweaking the fonts and the formatting, you'll write draft after draft. But what if your boss gave you just 2 hours for that exact same task? All of a sudden, your brain just instinctively laser focuses on the absolute essentials, and bam, the report gets done. Same task, but a completely different amount of effort. So why? Why do our brains fall for this trick every single time? I mean, it's not because we're lazy. It's because we are basically hardwired with a few cognitive traps that make us our own worst enemies when it comes to managing time. And here are the 3 main culprits. First up, we've got something called complexity bias. Our brains have this weird need to make a task feel important enough to justify the time we have. Second is just good old procrastination. Without any real pressure, our brain's pleasure center just wants to do fun stuff. That is, until that last-minute panic monster finally shows up and forces us to focus. And third, there's social stigma. You know, in a lot of office cultures, if you finish early, people might think you don't have enough to do. So we stretch things out just to look busy. Now, what's really interesting is that this law doesn't just affect us as individuals. Oh no, it has a famous cousin that explains why entire teams, even whole companies, can get completely bogged down by the least important stuff. This is called the law of triviality, but people usually call it the bike shed effect. And here's the key takeaway. We naturally tend to talk about things we can easily understand. Not because they're important, but because, weighing in on them makes us feel competent and involved. It feels good. Let's look at the classic example that gave it its name. A committee gets together to discuss 2 things on their agenda. First up, a super complex $10 million plan for a nuclear reactor. I mean, honestly, hardly anyone in the room really understands all the technical details. The second item, a $350 bike shed for the employees. And the result is, well, it's kind of staggering. The $10 million reactor, it gets approved in about 5 minutes flat. Why? Because nobody feels qualified enough to even ask a question. But that bike shed? Oh, everyone's got an opinion on the color, the right materials, the best location, and that discussion drags on for 2 full hours. The group's most valuable energy is completely wasted on the most trivial thing. And this might seem kind of funny, but the impact is actually really serious. Constantly letting our work expand to fill the available time, that's not just a bad habit. This sort of false busyness creates this constant low-level hum of stress that takes a very real toll on us, both physically and mentally. So here's the biological price we end up paying. First, something called decision fatigue. When you stretch a 2-hour task over a whole week, you're forcing yourself to make thousands of tiny, draining little micro-decisions about it for days. And second, there's the Zeigarnik effect. This is a weird psychological quirk where our brains basically obsess over unfinished tasks. So by keeping a task open way longer than it needs to be, you are literally programming your own mind for a state of constant low-grade anxiety. But here is the really good news. Now that we know about this law, we can actually flip it on its head. We can consciously use this weird quirk of our own psychology to our advantage, to get more done, and this is the important part, to be way less stressed. So how do we do it? It really comes down to three simple strategies. Number one, you've got to set your own aggressive, totally artificial deadlines. Two, use this incredibly powerful technique called time boxing. And three, if a task is going to take you less than 2 minutes, just follow the rule and do it right then and there.
Let's really zero in on time boxing because this is your single greatest weapon against Parkinson's law. So instead of a vague goal like, I'll work on that report today, you make a really specific contract with yourself. I am going to work on this report from 10 to 10:45 a.m., and that is it. This deliberate limitation forces your brain to be efficient. It literally manufactures a sense of urgency, and it protects the rest of your day. Basically, you create focus by creating scarcity.
All right, theory is great and all, but let's make this real. I want you to actually try this out. Not tomorrow, not next week. I mean, right now, as soon as we're done here. No, seriously, think about it for a second. What is that one nagging little thing on your to-do list? That email you know you need to send, that phone call you need to make. Maybe it's that small project you've been avoiding because it just feels kind of big and vague.
Okay, here is your challenge. Pick that one task. Grab your phone and set a timer for just 15 minutes. And for those 15 minutes, you give it your absolute 100% undivided attention. I promise you, you will be absolutely amazed at what you can get done when you finally stop giving your work all the time in the world.